So, welcome to my final study group. We tried to pack the house for you. Wow. Thank you all for coming out here. It's been such a tremendous semester. I know the interest is I'm a resident fellow, but I'm only a resident fellow for about 24 more hours. So I tried to do a nice, small, intimate interview for my last event. And like the intro said, I couldn't be more timely. So just thank you so much, Governor Walz, for sitting down with me for what's going to be, I think, a really interesting conversation.
Well, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I mentioned earlier I got a chance to sit down with some students in the smaller study group and have a little bit of bite to eat or whatever, and I mentioned to them that on the nicest day of the year, you are either truly committed to this issue or you have no life whatsoever. But I'm grateful. To the Institute of Politics, thank you. And I say this as someone in full disclosure who has used Harvard as the butt of some of my jokes. You know, I use it out there. I still find it funny when I say this. I say I graduated from Chadron State College, and I said, you may know it by its more common name, the Harvard of the Midwest.
Naturally.
Yeah.
Right.
But I will say in all seriousness, and I hear it across this country, especially over this last week, a huge thank you for Harvard for standing on the principles this country is founded. It's important. So looking forward to the conversation, but it does matter. I mentioned to the director that I had the president of the Farmers Union, of all the things to talk to me about, knew I was coming out here and wanted to make sure that I expressed that. And I would be remiss, there's a lot of special guests here, but someone who I had become a good friends with, considered a mentor, and actually helped get me reelected. The governor of all governors, Roy Cooper, is here.
Thanks for coming.
It's a pretty finicky group of 23 or 24 Democratic governors. Roy Cooper led that Democratic Governors Association and led us all to re-election. So thanks, Roy. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, I feel like there's a million ways we can jump into this conversation. Here's how I want to do it. We're going to do a little bit on the past, a lot on the present, and a little bit on the future. And maybe some wiggle room in between. You down?
That seems fair.
Let's just jump into it, because I know there are reporters watching and they're on a deadline, so I am very respectful to their time. You've been traveling the country, going through red districts, talking to voters, some who are on your side, probably many who aren't. My question to you is, has your prognosis of why the ticket lost changed after these conversations?
Well, I don't know if it changed. I think trying to assess this, and I think it's a healthy thing to do. I got asked right away, and it's an obvious first question. They said, would you have done anything different to be on this? First of all, the sense of gratitude I had to be on the ticket with Vice President Harris and knew what our mission was. We had about 100 days to prevent what's happening from happening. And I knew that was important. And this is look, there's no second place trophy in this. It's zero sum. But when I got asked, they said, would you have done anything different? Well, yes, we would have won. That's what I'd have done different. And with that being said, how do you assess this? And I think for me, what I'm learning going up, and I don't know, like when I got asked, you're out here assessing, what the Democratic Party needs to do. I recognize I might be the last person you'd want to ask. I'm the guy that just got beat in this, and part of that. So I recognize that part of it. But what I am most interested in is that you run for these jobs to improve people's lives. I don't believe their lives are going to be improved. And I was out there to try and understand, why did you not believe that before November? Why did you not believe? And the folks I'm really focused on are those who stayed home, of why they stayed home. And I think what I came out of that with is, we talked about this a little bit upstairs with your students, that there's a lot of people that said, what difference does it make? They're all the same. And that's a pretty stinging indictment because I think we're very different. I have no intention of limiting people's reproductive rights. I do believe climate change is real. I think you should have the right to collectively bargain. I believe you invest in our children in education, and healthcare is a universal human right. So those are the things I talk about. But I think people are saying, yeah, that's fine, but we don't really have any of those things yet. And it became clear to me that there's some pieces that were missing out there. And I took it in Minnesota to do this. When you have political power, you better not just be banking it to get reelected. You better be burning it to improve lives. And this idea of, have we not done that enough? Did we not convince people? And why is it that people were questioning? Tens of millions said, I'm just going to stay home because things will work out pretty much the same anyway. What is left when you watched President Biden navigate a global pandemic, navigate us out of a recession that could have been, put us in a position to do this in a way that was talking about a soft landing and improving people's lives, and yet still a majority of Americans didn't believe that. So that tells me there's a disconnect, and I think it behooves us to soul search a bit, listen, go out there, especially these areas. My district in Minnesota is a great example of this. I won that district, and look, there had only been one other Democrat since 1892. I won in 2006. I won by 30 points in 2008. In 2016, I won by less than 2 points, and Donald Trump won by 17 points. What changed in southern Minnesota? Farm Fields, Mayo Clinic, Mankato State University, Mankato, these places. What changed during that time? And how did we go from overwhelmingly have those people's support to not only not having their support, having their disdain in a place where these were my neighbors? So I'm out there, whether it's Wheeling, West Virginia, or up in Youngstown, Ohio. We went down to Houston, Texas, or actually Fort Bend, down to Omaha, and asked these folks, what is it? And one of the reasons going out there too is I was hearing it. People were like a primal scream of, my God, stop this. This is craziness. What can we do? And asking what we can do. And that's what I'm asking them, what they want to see us do.
And some of those voters, Democrats or people probably voted for you as governor and for Donald Trump as president.
They did.
So it's an interesting overlap to try to reckon with.
That still. So thousands. But that was still there. But look, the folks here at the Institute who know these numbers, it was not that unusual that you would see a scatter plot that upwards of well over 100+ districts a few decades ago would vote for a member of Congress from one party and the president from another. That continued to shrink. And by the time my last election in 2016, that year there were 4 districts that Donald Trump won by 15 points or more that also elected a Democrat to Congress. 3 of them were in Minnesota. We were just the last state to succumb to this, that it went, but then we became, and the other one was in Pennsylvania, not surprisingly. So you have these districts where people are still splitting their ticket. That's basically the last time that they've done that. And that's a troublesome trend, in my opinion, that you used to see conservative, Republicans crossing over from, or liberal Republicans and conservative Democrats used to be on each side of that scatter plot. Now we've pulled apart, and that's really troubling. And it is pretty much split on urban-rural divide, and that's a real challenge.
And Governor, this is a strong, clear Democratic message that I heard from you a lot when you weren't the vice presidential nominee. I don't know if you guys know, you could not run away from Tim Walz on TV, whether you wanted to or not, on cable. There was a time where I was flicking channels in the newsroom, and you were doing a lot of hits, yeah. Right? And then you became the vice presidential nominee.
And you thought I disappeared?
Well, I don't think, can I be frank? It wasn't just me. It was a lot of people, not just reporters, but people I've been talking to this entire semester saying, where the heck did Tim Walz go? So my question for you, and there are a million ways for us to get into this conversation, is, was that your choice?
No, yes. I said the choice to be on this ticket, the privilege of being on it. When you sign up for this, I'm a team player. I'm with it. And there's folks that I recognize are smarter than me. They analyze this. You put your input in. Running a campaign that had never been run before, 100 days, in the situation we were at, running against a very unusual opponent on the other side. Mm-hmm. And look, my job was to do it. Look, I knew I was on the ticket. I would argue because we did a lot of amazing progressive things in Minnesota to improve people's lives. But I also was on the ticket, quite honestly, because I could code talk to white guys watching football, fixing their truck, doing that I could put them at ease. I was the permission structure to say, look, you can do this and vote for this. And you look across those swing states, with the exception of Minnesota, we didn't get enough of those votes.
But you could be giving them permission on TV every day. You could have been messaging that way, and that isn't necessarily how it shook out.
Well, yes, but I also said I understand myself. I said I think I'll give you pretty good stuff, but I'll also give you 10% problematic. And so somebody's got to make the decision here to handle some of this stuff and to make it in. Those are just decisions that were made. And I think after the fact, it is not second guessing or anything. I think it's fair to go back on and look at this. Look, we had the most qualified person who'd run for president in this country's history at the top of the ticket. That in itself should have got this thing won. We had, in my opinion, and you can disagree with me, I think history will prove me right, a very unqualified person on the other side. And you have to determine, how do you get those hits? What was the best way? Did it make sense to continue to, call him weird or call that out, or make this pitch that we are significantly different and our policies can improve your lives. And there's people that make those decisions, and whether it's right or wrong or not, I guess history will make that case.
What do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah.
I think this was going to be hard. I think that we are going to have to think, why have we lost the self-identity that the Democratic Party is for personal freedoms, they're for middle-class folks, they're for labor rights. How did we lose it where people didn't self-identify that? And how did we get to a point where people didn't feel like this was an important enough election to get out there and vote? That I don't know. Me being out there more, no, I doubt that would have made the difference. I know it probably wouldn't, but I do think what I learned from that, just candidly, was if you leave a void, Donald Trump will fill it. And so I think you've got to be in every place as often as you can in every single day of every minute to make that pushback, because I think the oxygen gets sucked out of the room and you get defined. I said this, you will get defined and your policies will get defined very quickly, because I don't think any one person right now in where we're at in America by themselves can be the counterweight to that noise that's there, that the attention they get. So I do think the lesson I learned on this is I think you're better off to do more, to be out more, to be in every forum you can be in.
So how is Tim Walz filling that void right now? Is it this listening tour, or what else is there for you? Well,
I'm governing in Minnesota, the state that ranks first in health care. Mara Healy's around here somewhere. I'm going to tell her that. That our competitors, we look to Massachusetts as being a peer state in this, in terms of education, access to education, biotech research, higher ed. My God, look where we're sitting here. And so I think one of the things is that I think this is a time to show an alternative model of governing and what governing can look like. If you elect us, here's what you're going to get. Your children are going to get enough food to eat. You're going to have the highest quality of health care. You're going to see personal incomes rise. You're going to see home ownership increase. You're going to see some of those things. So I think that's one way. And then I think because of the platform that the vice president afforded me and being a governor, going out to these places that don't get to see that. And I'll have to tell you, this town hall thing, it is a bit of me being an a-hole to these people. I'll acknowledge.
What do you mean?
Well, I acknowledge this, that it came out from their leadership. Don't do town halls, you're just going to get yelled at. Well, I served in Congress, and I was there in the summer of 2009 and 2010 when the Tea Party was birthed, and we were debating the ACA. And I stood in front of thousands of angry constituents for hours and took the questions, not like, oh, look at you, you're a tough guy or whatever. It was my job. I was elected to do it. But I had no problem doing that because I could defend the ACA. I could defend why I voted for that. And I saw these guys, their leadership tell them, don't do the town halls, you're just going to get yelled at. Well, you need to come out and tell us why cutting Medicaid's a good idea. You need to come out why you think you can deport people without due process. If you believe in that stuff, just answer it. I felt really personally, as a former member of Congress, that was wrong. And I also felt I had the ability that if you're not going to show up, I'm going to make this really unpleasant for you because your constituents are going to come. And I'm telling you, for some of you in here wondering if it matters to members of Congress. These people can read a paper faster than anybody. When you're looking for one name, that's all they do. They went, oh, God, there's my name in the paper, and they're yelling at me.
Yeah.
It matters to them about how that's being done, and there's the capacity, especially in the districts we're choosing, that there's going to be a big impact on people. And I'll just make the case. We went down to Omaha. That's a district that the vice president won by 10 points. That one blue dot that's out there in Nebraska, their member of Congress won. That was one of the very few ones. Voted for Kamala Harris. They voted for this guy to be in Congress. And I went down to kind of hammer on it, and I see this weekend he's going to spend more time with family, it sounds like, is what he said. That's how this works. That's how this works.
It's like a form of resistance, kind of a pressure campaign from the outside, in a way.
Yeah, and I'm just there to join that resistance. I've said this, that people are coming to these town halls not to see me. I'm going to see them. They're doing it on their own. You show up or not, they're going to be there. I'll guarantee you that. And they're going to yell at Democrats who don't show up too, which I think is actually a valid place to be, that there is, we were talking about, is the resistance. It's not a 1 million person march, but I can tell you these town halls are not performative. People are coming and they're angry and they're saying it. And I asked in Youngstown, you're not supposed to ask, I said, how many here have never been to like a political event or rally? Because the assumption is, if you're Republicans, they're all being paid, checks or whatever. But I kind of thought it would be a lot of just really geared up Democrats. about half the people raised their hands, said they'd never been to one. And that showed me that those people who stayed home from the last election or who we weren't engaging with, they might not be ready to vote for us, but they're ready to listen to what's happening. And I think that's our opening at this point. And so it's real. It's not performative. Folks are angry. They want to see something get done. They're not convinced. I'm not convinced at this time that they're ready to vote for us, but I think they're ready for something different.
Are you talking to other Democrats about this? Because it can't just be Tim Walz's war to wage on your own. And it can't just be, or you could tell me, Cory Booker doing a filibuster on the floor.
It matters. It matters. And look, I served in Congress, so I'm like, somebody goes, oh, do you miss Congress? No, I'd rather eat glass. No. But the people who are at Congress is really important right now. And the people who dismiss that, first of all, dismissing the physical ability to do what he did, I think that's a whole other subject. Sure. But it was about tangible resistance at a time right after the vote on the CR that felt like nothing was happening. I think it mattered. And I think whether it's Bernie Sanders in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho with AOC doing it, is that changing things? Is it passing any legislation? No. But I'm convinced, what I say is, I think every Democrat needs to be out there, every independent, and I would say every Republican who cares about rule of law in our institutions should be out filling the lanes, because I don't think any one of us can suck up the oxygen of Donald Trump, but I think if everybody's in the lane. And if your cup of tea, as I said, is doing podcasts with folks, then do the podcast.
Like Gavin Newsom.
That's right.
He has a very popular podcast.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Sure.
Yeah, no, and look, there's been some contention around this. I said this. I think it's healthy for us. It would not be my choice to go on a podcast and listen to Steve Bannon talk, but it would not be my choice. But I got to tell you, Gavin Newsom's getting people to listen to that. I know what Gavin Newsom can do, and he's out there. He's the governor of the fourth largest economy in the world. He has something to add. You can disagree with that, but all of a sudden now we're talking about Democrats. Now, you might say, yeah, but we're talking about the wrong damn stuff. Well, that might be true. But here's what I feel like. We got to fill every single lane. And if there's one that's better than another, then let's all pick that lane and do more of that. But just sitting back in the silence of doing, we're counting on status quo. That's the biggest thing that you mentioned, I'll go back to the learning something on this is.
Sure.
The intense frustration with the status quo. There was an article, it's the 100 days of the Trump administration. I know it's like, if I ever have 100 days to live, I would spend it in the Trump administration because it's like a lifetime, you know. But they asked Aretas County in Minnesota, a rural county, of all the things that is up near the Canadian border, being punished by tariffs and things, agriculture being under threat, lack of FEMA, all the things are going. Say, you're putting up with a lot of hurt. And the people said, yeah, but it's worth it. It's worth it to get there. You've heard them say this. Nobody's jumping ship yet. But there was a guy, and they put in the paper, former Democrat, who said, look, I don't know if Donald Trump is right about the stuff he's doing. In fact, I think he's probably wrong on some of it. But I support him because he's willing to bust things up and give it a try. And that idea of he correctly identified their pain, and then he said he was going to fight for them, and then he picked the exact worst solution to all those things, making life worse for them. But the first two things outweighed the results, which is a really stunning thing to think about. And I think there's a fundamental here for Democrats. The competency and the getting things done. We heard this, and I did this with President Biden. That Infrastructure Act, if I'd have been in Congress when they passed the Infrastructure Act, I consider that one of the top 5 most influential votes of the last 3 decades, in my opinion, transformationally. It was huge. Nobody could get it done, and they got it done, and everybody just forgot about it. I said, not me. We had money for like a bridge. I put up the biggest damn sign that said, brought to you by Joe Biden. Don't forget it. Every day. And it sounds kind of silly, but I think there's this competency. We win on the issues and we win on competency, and then we lose the message and we lose power and we get in this situation. So,
it's perception asymmetry. So I think what I'm hearing, because I've been traveling the country talking to voters during the last election, and there's perception from, I don't want to just say some, but many, including Democrats, that the party is weak. I'm oversimplifying it, right? But that's probably what you heard from that voter.
That's fair.
But I think that leads me to my next question about your own self-perception of the Democratic Party. Because we can talk about policy and we can talk about message, but there are Democrats who are yapping right now. There's no shortage of takes about what went wrong. And some of the perception is we went too woke. We Democrats went too woke, and we should have been talking about this, that, and there's too much of a lurch to the left. But we had Jim Clyburn here just a couple of weeks ago, and he said there is no party messaging problem. It's a perception. But the policies are good. I don't think anything's wrong with the state of the party right now. Where does Tim Walz fall on that?
I think he's right on that the policies are good. And I love Jim Clyburn on this. I do think we were able, and Fox News, like, I'm sure you'll get me to say something tonight. Every day I find something that gives them a whole segment on Fox News. I drank a damn malt with Roy Cooper out of a straw, and that just questioned my manhood, Roy. So that's what you got. I was on
Any
Fox
comment,
News
Governor?
the whole time. So it was a damn good malt, I'll tell you that. So, no, but I do think we have been defined. They did one a while ago because I'm not going to shy away from this. I said, in a state like Minnesota that's older and white, 70% of our workforce is going to come from communities of colors. Diversity and inclusion is really good for us. And equity is kind of a founding principle. How did we get that defined in a way that meant we were taking jobs from other people, whatever it might be? Because we've seen what their DEI looks like. It's a pretty bunch of incompetent white dudes that are in the administration right now. Why did we get defined as the people who were trying to game the system rather than bringing talent to the system and getting things done? So I don't think I think we assume a lot. And I'll say this as a teacher, and I don't want to be like, I'm in no fight with anybody on this. If you're losing half the population and our policies are good and would improve their lives, I don't think you can assume that the people aren't that smart and can't get it. Is there a certain percentage that has issues like misogyny and racism? Yes, and we can acknowledge that. But it's certainly not the vast majority that we should be getting. I say this as a teacher. If I'm teaching a class and half the students don't get the content, then I probably haven't delivered it the right way. I think the Democratic Party has a hard time differentiating delivery and education. There's room for Gavin Newsom's podcast, and there's room for Bernie Sanders rallies, and there's room for Andy Bashir, like, rallying folks up. Damn it, he's a Democrat who's going to be down at the Kentucky Derby, and they're going to be loving him at that. That says something, and he's standing on those policies. You don't see Andy Bashir shying away from protecting women's reproductive rights. He does it in Kentucky. I just think our policies are good. We let them define us. And I mentioned this, Roy, in North Carolina is where I saw it. Those last couple weeks of the campaign, the signs that popped up. Trump, safety. Kamala, crime. Trump, wealth. Kamala, poverty. And it was just one word on each one. And at first I'm like, what are we, first graders? For Christ's sakes. And then I'm like, oh my God, these are pretty devastating as they were doing it. That how they were messaging that out, even though our policies would have created more wealth. Our policies would have helped with home ownership, but it didn't get there. So I'm making the case we're going to have to figure out how to differentiate. And it doesn't mean we micro-target and change our message for who we're with. We just recognize that people take in the information differently and how they're going to get it. And we've got a problem now in that we got a whole bunch of young men, too, that went that way. Now, you know, when you vote young, you tend to get kind of locked in a little bit. My 18-year-old son tells me, Dad, a lot of these people weren't voting on policy. It was just more fun to vote for Trump, or there was more going on type of thing. You can laugh about it, but there's maybe some truth there.
I think there's a ton of truth there.
I do think there's some there, but we're going to have to figure out, you can't go tell people like, how were you so stupid to vote for Trump? You're not going to get them to vote for you by calling them that. You're going to say, look, he lied to you, or whatever it might be. We need to mind our house with the recognition that there's going to be an opportunity here, but what does post-Trump governing look like? And I would just say to all of you, and I think you get this is not something new in American politics. We were discussing this illiberal attack on this. This is, President Jackson. This is Japanese internment. We got a streak of this in us, and we should notice that. When Donald Trump's gone, the tendencies to get to the point we got will still be there. Have we learned any lessons to try and prevent that from happening is what I'm trying to. And again, I don't have the answer for it, but we should all find it.
And I want to clarify, what I was saying was legitimate, too, is a very strong section of young men have pivoted more conservative. It's like a very real trend we see in the numbers, see in the young men I talked to. And of the three leaders, you said that, you talked about Bernie Sanders, none of these people are younger than 40, right? Kevin Newsom?
Thank you for reminding us.
They remind me of my age every day in study group. But who are the young Democrats that you look to as leaders? Because I do not think that you can just throw Gavin Newsom here at Harvard and then suddenly the issue is fixed. In fact, I think that would probably backfire.
Look, we've got a lot of them, and I'm partial to governors. I will say that. I think you've got Wes Moore out there. You've got Josh Shapiro. You've got Gretsch. All these folks are look. It's okay to get younger folks in, but like 50-year-olds have like learned something in their lifetime. We don't want to throw them all out.
Oh, sure.
So I think getting engaged and being there, I think there's a lot of voices out there. The thing that I think you should look at is there's a lot of Democratic voices in state houses and state senates and AGs that are out there too. We tend to look towards Congress and we elect a Martin Frost, we elect some of these people, which is great, but there's a whole lot of them out there. There's young mayors that are doing this work. And I think for all of you in here, and this is the way it works, is there is an incredible opportunity that America is hungry for new leadership, because that's what we do, but ideas that really resonate. And so when I got asked who's the leader of the Democratic Party right now, again, a whole Fox News statement, segment, because I said, well, hell if I know. I think it's the people who are out in the streets right now. And that's actually the right answer, because we should be hearing that, reflecting that. It doesn't mean that you reflect everything. You got to show some leadership, organize, get things done. But there are people out in the streets right now. I'm seeing it. They're figuring out how to get 10,000 people organized in 4 days to show up orderly. By the way, all of this resistance, isn't it funny? Not one police officer had to be beaten to show this, resistance. That there is a peaceful resistance that's happening amongst a new group of leaders. And the Democrats who are, like I said, our job can be there to amplify that, pour fuel on that fire, or whatever it be. If you're in elected office, you should use that. But don't overlook those folks who are rising up, getting this done.
What do you think that means for the midterms? You're seeing a groundswell. Where does it lead?
Well, we need to win, and Roy Krupp would be proud of me saying this again. We need to win the Virginia governor's race, which I think there's 2 governor's races this year, Virginia and New Jersey. And don't sleep on New Jersey, because they have a tendency to elect Republican governors. Some states do this. Massachusetts, what the hell's wrong with you? You do this too. You're the bluest state in the union, and you got Charlie Baker. What the heck? I understand, a little different type of Republican. But this race down in Virginia will be telling because of the federal workers and the idea that we'll be going from a staunchly pro-Trump governor and those that are running for it to the chance to win. And what I say what happens then, how this applies to the midterms, is you've got about 14 Republicans in districts that Kamala Harris won and Joe Biden won. They start getting really nervous now, because if they continue to hang right with Donald Trump, their chance of getting reelected is a lot less. And I've never understood this. People that will give up every damn bit of their dignity and their firstborn child to stay in Congress, it's not that good a job. And you got to keep some dignity in this. And right now, I said this, and I don't mean it, I have to be careful again when I say it so that the language isn't inflammatory. They are more worried about their political career ending because of Donald Trump primarying them than they are of the voters. The minute they become more afraid of the voters ending their political career, it's funny how they'll start to change and they'll start to moderate. And when that happens, the agenda slows down and you've got the opportunity. I think that there's, history would show this, that it's almost impossible to win seats in a midterm of the president in power. It's only happened a couple times. Joe Biden, George Bush did it only 1 or 2 other times. So I think history is not on Donald Trump's side, and the ability to be able to win in those midterms should be, we should have a wind at our back. Now, if he's successful in shutting down our #1 fundraising site in Act Blue, then it becomes harder. If the women in this room who are married have to go find their birth certificates and prove what their maiden name was, that becomes harder. If you say you can't hand out water to people like in Iowa when they're waiting in line, that becomes harder. If you close polling stations, whatever, do I think we're going to face a lot of voter suppression? Yes. Yes, I do. But I also think Wisconsin was a good example of this. We always do well in midterms. We as Democrats do well in midterms and special elections because those are pretty high propensity voters. We lose the folks who vote in the presidentials and then don't vote again. That tends to happen. So I'm convinced of this. We run campaigns in presidential years like that's the off-year electorate. That is a very different electorate, and it takes a different strategy. And I don't have the answer. Otherwise, we would have won, or our team would have won, but we didn't. But what happened in I'll give you an example of this. Special elections in Iowa, where Donald Trump won by 27 points or whatever, we had Democrats win Senate seats there. In Minneapolis, the bluest of all the blue districts in the country, we had the Senate Majority Leader passed away, Democrat, and we had a special election here a couple months ago for that. That seat is going to be won by a Democrat by 40 points every single time. That's not the most amazing thing. And Minnesota always ranks first or second in voter turnout all the time. That special election this year was the highest turnout special election in Minnesota history. Same thing happened in Wisconsin for this thing. And it helped over there that we had the most loathsome man in the universe putting in millions of dollars to be able to.
Can you clarify who you're talking about?
Yes. Well, then when I do this, it's like he threatens to sue me. Like, I have no money. Like, well, that's the good part. So, but Elon Musk being over there gave us a foil, and they won. Judge Crawford won by 10 points, and the electorate was bigger than in the presidential, which we lost by a point. All we needed to do was get a tenth of that extra turnout. We didn't have to convert anybody's vote. We just needed to get those that showed up to vote for Judge Crawford in that race. And so I think there's lots of wind at our back, but it's been 100 days of destruction. You think we can survive 550 more? That's the real challenge. That's how long it is till the midterm.
So do you think it's a blue wave, a blue sprinkle? Want to get you out early on this one.
I should be like they pay people to make these predictions.
Oh, sure.
Like, there's a job on TV. That's the best part. These elected officials here will tell you this. The funnest thing is listening to people talk about, like, what happened in the campaign. I'm like, oh, that is bullshit. I was there. None of that happened.
Well,
I was, like, in the room. None of that happened.
There's a way to tell your own story, sir.
Look, I think there's every reason to believe with this energy that's out there, with how we're talking, we staying true to who we are. We put proposals out that are positive, improve people's lives, and we're committed to, once we're elected, to doing that to improve lives. I think we will take back the House. I am very pessimistic about the Senate, just to be honest with you, the way things work. I think it's a very difficult. Look, two of the people I admire as much as anybody who served in Congress was Sherrod Brown and John Tester. And if John Tester can't win, you're not going to find somebody that's going to win the way it is in Montana right now. Now, the question is, we have to fundamentally change who we are, because, look, John Tester got drugged down, and I don't blame him. Like, he was a dear friend of mine. We served in there during the presidential campaign. He's like, don't call me, dude. And so, the thing is being associated with national parties and things on these state races. We're going to have to figure that piece out of how do we reimagine. And I'm making it because, look, I'm not a Democrat in Minnesota. I'm a Democratic Farmer Labor Party. We combine the two parties with Humphrey. It's a little different. Now, will I tell you there's much difference now? No, but there is a historical ideology here of focusing on the working class in a way that brings them in. We still do have strong labor, and you do here too. I think we have to start planning right now. I know you hate this. I hate it. Everybody hates it. These campaigns have already started. Should we pass a law and do the European thing and have 60-day races? Yes, we should do that. Should we have campaign finance reform? Yes, we should do that. In the absence of that, Donald Trump has been running since he came down that damn escalator and never stopped. We have to do the same thing or we're not going to win.
Speaking of running, you said that you're not running for president.
I am not.
Why not you? You were on a ticket. You're a sitting governor. You have a very strong Democratic message, as I'm sure Democrats in the room might agree to.
I'm handsome.
Well, I don't like to editorialize.
Look,
they don't clap for me like
when I say we should be running, I don't think an individual should be running. I think we collectively as a party and those elected officials should be running this campaign, kind of like the old school mountain climbing expeditions. You never knew who was going to summit. It was whoever was ready at the last moment, and on summit day, if somebody was in the best shape, push them to the top and the whole team gets credit.
But Governor, someone is going to be like, well, I'm just soft launching my listening tour, and then suddenly it's going to be the exploratory campaign, and then, you know how these things work.
No, I think that's okay, but here's
right?
what I'm telling you. No, I think you're right. But I would just tell you, I've been out at these town halls, been on the street listening, see things like this or whatever. if people think you're hungry for the office rather than the moment that we're in the fighting of this, I think they're going to bury you. I think people are not very patient right now for the politics as usual. I'm trying to make the case that we're collectively as a team flood the zone. I've been advocating for it. It's never going to happen. Somebody's got to organize it. I don't think I can get it done, but I think we should have a shadow government that should do press conferences every day in contrast to theirs. They do this in Britain, and it pains me. It pains me to say the British do this right. And in full disclosure to all of you, all those times I crapped on Harvard, I take it back. I take it back. You're standing up, you're doing it. But it's that thing that the Brits do it right that we're seeing. So look, we're seeing it today in Canada. I don't know if somebody's getting results on their phone, but that campaign is only a few months long, and it's not this craziness. That's not our world. So I think we need to collectively run a presidential campaign without a candidate right now that builds all the infrastructure, helps us clarify this, and by the time we get to 2028, we're ready to get this won.
So you have no fantasy picks, no draft picks for
No,
ticket?
I told the class earlier on this, my son came to me back in August before we were picked, and he went to one of those offshore betting sites where you can bet on politics. He comes to me and he said, "Dad, give me $100." I said, "No, what?" He said, "You're 9,000 to 1." It was probably a good idea he had, but no. Here's what I think. I think it's a super talented bench. Do I think the person who's out there? No, I'm not sure they're out there yet. But I think what's really hopeful to me is that you have people coming on a Monday night to a forum on politics at a time. Look, I don't want to whistle past the graveyard. I'm the eternal optimist. I've always said that I wasn't just a joke. I supervised the lunchroom for so long. You have to be an optimist to do that. So I've always believed it. I've been around young people. I asked them, and a lot of them have no reason in this room to necessarily be very optimistic and hopeful right now, but you still are. It's the nature of it. But I think it doesn't do us any good to not recognize the danger we're in. I think you have to do that. Don't go home and doom scroll and all that. That's what's different. That's your alternative right now.
Yeah.
To go home and what crazy crap happened today.
I'm on TikTok. Yeah. I'm watching cooking videos.
Yeah, but if you do it just a day or so, all I'm getting is kitten videos, dogs, and just this dragging of Katy Perry. That's all I'm getting. That's all I'm getting.
Kia.
So it's
Kia.
I'm sorry, that is all I'm getting.
Yeah. The concert's not doing well. But I have one final cue from me before we throw it to the room. So if you see microphones start lining up, it's a simple one, Governor. I'll regret if I don't do blank before 2028. Fill in the blank.
Wow.
It's an easy one.
I think do what I can do to help define the Democratic Party as a party that's there to protect rule of law, personal freedoms, and the things we care about. It's my job in any small area, and I don't care if it's Omaha or Wheeling, West Virginia, to make the case that there's value in what we stand for. I never had to think about this growing up because there was the Democratic Party with Social Security survivor benefits, take care of my mom when my dad died. We got to get back to that, and that's my goal, to try and redefine who we are in a thing that people are proud of to be there.
All right. Are you guys ready to ask a couple of questions? You don't have to introduce yourself, but if you'd like to, you can. I'll see through the lights, and let's just start.
This space is really cool.
Welcome to the JFK Jr. Forum,
Yeah.
Governor. Only the best. Yeah. It's the power of Veritas or something. All right. Let's start over here.
Hi, Governor. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Megan. I'm a first year at the college. I'm from Minnesota.
Yay!
If you know where Eden Valley is, it's a small town of 1,000 people, so I don't blame you if you don't. It's between Wilmer and St. Cloud.
Yes, of course.
Right. So I want to kind of switch gears a little bit. So it's kind of an understatement to say that we're in a very chaotic time, specifically as students at Harvard. I'm sure you've seen us in the news all the time. There's a lot going on, and a lot of students are feeling kind of helpless right now. You talked a little bit about what the Democratic Party can do. Is there anything we can do as students to take action and feel a little bit less helpless right now?
Yeah, and thank you for asking that question. Look, I am concerned about this, and I've been saying this especially, and I think those of us of older folks that are here need to acknowledge this. It is far harder being a young person in America now than it ever was. They are lying to you if they tell you that it was hard when they were growing up. Oh, we went to school on horseback, uphill. Bull crap. They went with almost no cost. I never worried once from a family that had no money that I was going to be able to go to school, and I never worried once I was going to be shot in a classroom. It's different now. And I think the one thing is that the country is hungry to see the optimism of youth, because right now, the mental health crisis, the stress you're under, there's a lot of things coming at you. I think you making the option to come here, and those who are wondering, like, this is a pretty engaged group, but I would tell this to everybody who's out there. Politics is who shows up, who literally shows up. I didn't do a single thing, electoral politics, other than vote until I was 41 years old. And the next thing I know, I'm there with the vice president. I'm like, damn, life comes at you fast. and it was just showing up and being in the right places. So I think right now, that for your own mental health, show action and getting out there. But here's the thing. This youth movement that's happening, and it's not ageism and all this, some people are too old, we can say that, but that you don't want to generalize it together. But the thing about youth there energizes everyone, and it re-energizes the party. And I think you should bring the ideas to this. Maybe I'm misvisioning what I think the Democratic Party is, and there needs to be more expense. Because look, we're having a debate. You said it, Brittany. We're having a debate. Look, you guys are focused too much on these fringe issues. Well, somebody's personal civil liberties is not really a fringe issue to them. And if we're not able to stand up for that, do they really believe we're going to stand up for other stuff? Because I got to say this. If Donald Trump's going to go full bigot, he's not giving an inch, and he's going to stay there. So if that's your gig, you're with him because you know he's got your back on bigotry or whatever it might be. We need to be the ones that make it clear who we are. And I don't know if we're speaking to you yet of where it's at. Like, we allowed them to define what I think, and President Biden's move on this was, the move to forgive student loans was something that our generation could finally get right for you. And they made that a problem for us. And it should have never been. The reason that these boomers and stuff are telling you that we paid our way through, because it didn't cost anything. There was no need to take out a loan because the generation in front of us paid on the front end. So this idea now that we made college so unaffordable, home ownership so unaffordable and everything, we have got to change that so that you feel like the party really does care.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Over here.
Thank you. Good evening. Chastity Costin from North Carolina. Governor Cooper, I love you.
She knows.
I am a Doctor of Education Leadership student from the Graduate School of Education. And Governor Walz, thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for your words of wisdom, for your work, not only in politics, but in the hardest field in the world, education. As you are a teacher and a coach, I'm also a fellow teacher, coach, and principal, my question is, what are your thoughts on the intersection of politics and education? And what would you say to someone like me who aspires to transform education through policy change, specifically as the U.S. Secretary of Education, if that role exists in a few years?
Hey. Well, yeah. So I never finished my dissertation, so I'm so jealous that you're going to get there. But thank you. It does matter. And this is one that's very personal. I think one of the things, this intersection, both at the level here, academic freedom that you see at our universities, but the access to quality public education, which I feel is under threat. And this idea that there was indoctrination happening. I mean, the irony of this is that we have to give vouchers to our parents because they're indoctrinating our kids in public school, so those parents can use those vouchers to go to religious school to indoctrinate them into this ideology. Our goal is to make sure everyone is welcome at our public schools. I would say this, and as the Secretary of Education, when you get that job, we need to not assume things again. And it's not about elitism or talking down to people. It's people are busy and don't know. And I say this as someone who has been in education my whole life. When the Department of Education was being dismantled, like just the fear and the hair on fire and how horrible this was, recognize that the vast majority of Americans have no idea what the Department of Education does. The Republicans especially know that because their constituents are coming to me and I'd hear them say that. Oh, thank God. Now we don't have to have that woke curriculum. I said, you know the Department of Education has nothing to do with curriculum, right? That's all local, at best state. They didn't know that. But what we should have been doing is the genius and the brilliance of the Department of Education was it was on the front line of civil liberty and civil rights for all students, including my son, who needed an IEP, and IDEA protected that child, making sure he could get it. People don't know that when that went away, now conservative, liberal, non-engaged parents are going to find out how fragile the situation is with their child to get them to where they need to be. And I would say when you become Secretary of Education, it needs to be less. The experts will do the pedagogy. They'll help figure out the Pell Grants and things. This is about the genius of the American public education system and access to everyone to get in there. And I think about that we've lost that piece of it, and we allowed them to believe that this was about a woke Department of Education that simply had the audacity to believe that we shouldn't warehouse this child. Maybe we can get him to a point where he can live a full life. I, as a parent, am very grateful for that. I'm also very worried that that's going to go away. So go do that and sell it.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Up here, and then here, and then I'll let you have one up the rafters. So.
Hi, thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is.
Does that feel cool being up on that balcony?
Awesome.
It's a nice view.
These are my favorite seats in the forum. But my name is Annabelle, and I'm a senior at the college. And I just wanted to ask, so I think there's an understanding that one of the larger problems facing the Democratic Party is that Democratic voters fail to unite behind a candidate. I think you saw that in 2016 when voters didn't vote for Hillary, Democratic voters didn't vote for Hillary, and again in 2024. And I think Democrats struggle with making the perfect the enemy of the good. And I think that is a problem of messaging, but I was curious what you think Democrats and Democratic Party leadership can do to resolve that problem and hopefully win some elections.
Yeah.
Thanks for your question.
It's a tough question, and I actually agree with you on this, and it's really hard. I was mentioning upstairs in Minnesota, we have Democratic Party does an endorsing convention, and they endorse their candidates for the offices. And I went to get the endorsement for governor in 2018, and I didn't get it. So I ran in a primary, and I won in that. That's considered somewhat disloyal by some folks or whatever, but I won the general election. And we passed Democratic policies, and the person I ran against is one of my closest allies in getting those things done. So I think part of this is that if we want to be a big tent, we want to take the ideas in this, we have to be willing to be challenged on those ideas. We have to understand, and it's got to be that the policies and the improvement of life is certainly bigger than any personality or anybody running. That's the part that I think we have to get by. Now, the problem with that is the public as a whole believes you need to elect this charismatic leader who's going to carry us over the finish line, and we stick with that. And if it's not our person, we do get a little bit bitter on it. So I know I'm just re-explaining the problem. I do think, I would hope, and we saw this, that the threat is enough to realize, but it wasn't in this last election. There were enough people that said on issues that were very divisive, said there's no difference between the candidates. They're the same, and they stayed home. I think, one, we need to make it clearer than that, and two, this is where Donald Trump will help us, the consequences of not getting that right are pretty catastrophic. So I think we have to keep with that. But I'm actually okay with challenging the status quo inside the party with new ideas and fresh ideas. But I do think once we pick a candidate, we've got to all agree that you got to go. Until we get a multi-party. Look, the goddamn Brits again. I would take more of a parliamentary approach to this because then it would make us compromise because there's no compromise. If we had 15 parties right now, you'd have to build a coalition. How do you think he was going to build a coalition with the Greens or anything? He can't even build a coalition with the Libertarians because there's nothing libertarian about what they're doing right now. So,
Thank you.
you.
All right, over here.
Hi, thanks for our speaker. I'm honored to be here. My name is Kyma. I'm a PhD student in Innovation and Public Policy at the University College London. And also from Minnesota, originally, product of Anoka Hennepin County.
We're everywhere.
My question is, I'm really interested, I'm also a Tech and Human Rights Fellow at the Carr and Ryan Center here. And so I'm really interested in digital transformation in government and have been paying a lot of attention to what's happening with Doge. I want to ask, in terms of rethinking public value alongside digital transformations that are happening in government, what do you think should be at the forefront in terms of priorities? Thank you.
Yeah, no, this is a great question. And this goes back again, if we want to have bold leadership, if we want to have transformational government, we have to have effective government. And one of the things is this is where these tech guys, there is something to be said about this. They're bold, they break norms, they tear things down, which is good if you're coming up with a new iPhone. It's terrible if it's your mom's Social Security check that might not show up. But I don't think we've done enough. And it's not about buying their frame and criticizing government. I don't believe government can fix everything, but I do believe government is a force of good. I believe government can protect civil liberties. I believe we can collectively do things together better. Here's where I think the technology piece of this, doing the things that we all know need to be done and we're concerned about, protecting personal freedoms and personal data, all of that. But we're starting to really embrace this in Minnesota, that we have the capacity to using AI in things like making sure fraud detection in government. I'll tell you, there's nothing. I'm dealing with this in Minnesota, where we had folks steal from the food programs during the pandemic. That undermines people's faith in government. And so the Republicans' answer is, if people steal from government, you shut down the government program and punish everybody else who wasn't stealing. Our role has to be to use this technology in a way that improves lives. And I heard this on a panel I sat with Governor Hochul of New York, and this was the data's pretty good, and it's early. They were using AI in foster placements. And you measure a foster placement by how successful it is, how long that child stays in that home, how long they're able to, continue to go to school and progress. Using AI over just humans picking how this was done, they improved their foster placement significantly, which when you think about that, the number of children's lives that were significantly improved by that embracing of technology and efficiency in government was dramatic. And I think it's trying to convince people that AI is not Terminator every time, but there are challenges with it, but government can be more innovative. This goes back again where Reagan made the case, the worst words you ever want to hear, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. That needs to be something that we say, yes, the government is here to help, and we can deliver on that. So I'm looking for the innovation in that. We're looking to embrace ways that we can get better to protect it, because if we don't do this, then the programs we love won't be there, and they make the case. It turns out Doge is going to be another one of those opportunities. It is going to be so ineffective, destructive, damaging, but ineffective on actually saving money and improving lives, that there's going to be an opening. But what I think most Americans will say is, well, the Democrats won't get it any better anyway. This is the case I'm making. I don't, wherever you land on this, I represent, again, a healthcare state, if you haven't heard me say that, with the Mayo Clinic, with others. If we come back into power, and when we do, if we tinker around the edges with healthcare rather than a radical transformation, we deserve to lose elections, because people have been talking about, damn it, how do I get health care? And look, I deal with this in Minnesota because I'm also home to United Healthcare. So you get both sides of the equation here that has to be figured out. I think technology helps us become more efficient and bolder on delivering things, because also I want government to do like all of you is. I want government to build the roads, be there for security, help with education, make sure my food's safe, all that. I want them the hell out of my life then. I don't need them in my bedroom. I don't need them telling me what I'm going to read. I don't need any of this. Do the stuff that government should do, then get out of the way. And I would just, unrelated to this, but say it, I thought this was my hardest and best argument during the campaign. I said, if for no other reason to vote for Kamala Harris is, you will not have to see that guy on TV every day, and you can go weeks without having to worry about that the president's screwing something up. I think technology gives us the idea, truly, to make some of these things work smoother for folks where they feel like they don't have to do it.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes left, so this will be our last question. Before we get there, I want to thank everybody so much, and I'll do another thank you at the end. It means so much to me. This is our last event. All right, take us home.
Governor, thank you so much for being here. My name is River, and I am a transgender man and an autistic student. I'm a senior at Thayer Academy, an incredible high school who has given its students the opportunity to attend this event. So I just want to say thank you, Mr. Fortunato, and all of the Thayer staff who have given us this opportunity. I love you guys. You guys are amazing. Now for my actual question. Given my neurodivergence and transness, I am more than a little scared right now. More specifically, I am very worried about how I have seen some Democrats talk about conceding trans rights and queer rights in general for more centrist and right-leaning support. What have you heard about that, and how are you working to support trans and queer rights for people of all ages?
Yeah. Well, River, thank you. Thank you for sharing and trusting us with your story. I would work backwards on this is, no matter what we say on this issue, we're not going to get their votes on this issue, so why wouldn't we be true to who we are in protecting all people's rights? In Minnesota, we made sure and made absolutely clear this is nobody's business but yours to make these decisions, that protecting and being a safe haven for the transgender community. I fought this issue back in Congress when we were going to, some of you remember this fight, when we were trying to pass the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, and it was not an all-inclusive. And we had many of our LGB, they forget the T on this one, rights group that wanted to pass ENDA, and the only way we could get Republican votes is to get rid of the trans part of it and not protect them in that. And I said, why would we pass that if we weren't going to be all-inclusive? And I think the issue, and I've said this all along, is if we truly believe that equality means equality for everyone. I said it the other day in my State of the State speech. You say you love freedom, but if you don't love it for everybody, you don't love freedom, you love privilege. And we're going to get pegged with these issues. We're going to get pegged with these issues, but I would tell you this, River, we have not been very good at making it clear that we're going to defend everyone's rights. And then we're going to move on and talk about economic issues. And we're going to move on and talk about education issues instead of making this case. And you know it's the case. I have legislators in Minnesota that are still coming at this issue. And I just asked them, when is the last time you saw a transgender athlete compete? And of course you know the answer is they haven't. Yeah. But the issue resonates and it pulls with people because it's the unknown. You can demonize a group that is relatively small in this country, but we're seeing it right now, and here's where I think there's hope in this, that I think people are starting to get this. If you can take Abreu Garcia and disappear him, they certainly can do it with anyone else. And I think this idea, we all know the quote, when they came for so-and-so, I said nothing. When they came for this group, I said nothing. When they came for this group, I said nothing. When they came for me, there was no one left to speak. Americans at heart know this is not the issue. Their 401k is not tanking because River wants to live the life they choose. Yeah. We need to say that and then give them an agenda that improves people's lives. I disagree, and this is going to be a debate. I may be on the wrong end of this one because it's going to come out there. I don't think, and I've said this, that you're going, I used to say this in Congress on votes. People would, when you're governor, you're watching the weather tonight because there's tornadoes in Minnesota. You got to get things done. When you're a member of Congress, you fret for months over a vote. Oh my God, I have to vote, and it's going to be tough, and how do I weigh this or whatever. My thinking from the first time I got there was, they're going to say it no matter what you voted for. And just do it, move on, because they're going to make it up. The same thing for our party. Do we really believe in equality and access for everyone? If we do, don't let them define it. Be strong about it. Then move to the issues we know impact greater number of people. And I don't know, maybe it's not going to work, but it was why I said this, because it is true. I think there's a strong human need to be part of broader society, but also just to mind your own business on things. That resonates with people like, yeah, you know what? I don't want you involved in this. So, River, I'm sorry you're going through this. We say in Minnesota, you are protected, you're seen, you're valued, you're loved. We have the law behind it to protect that. Do we always get it right? No. There are still people that will do what they can do. But the force of the law is behind. We're a trans refuge state. We are seeing more people move to Minnesota than any other, and I make the case on this. We are a better state because of that. We will be stronger. We will be more economically strong, and we can live with ourselves because we're not horrible, damn human beings. And I think that means that.
Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Is my
Thanks,
mic
everybody.
hot? Thank you, Governor Walz, for coming, and thank you all for this last event, okay?
Thanks.